I knew something was wrong the second my front door opened too easily. I never leave my beach house unlocked, so who had a key, and why were my kitchen lights on when I'd been out of town for 3 days when I stepped inside? My mother-in-law, Margaret Collins, was sitting on my couch like she owned the place, flipping through a stack of my property documents. "You should have told me you were moving in," I said, my voice shaking. She didn't even look up. "Oh, honey, I'm not moving in. I already live here." On the coffee table, I saw an email printed out my name, a digital signature, and a transfer I never agreed to. "If you're watching this, tell me where you're from and what time it is for you right now. I'm curious who's here with me, and if you've ever had someone cross a line you didn't even know existed, stick around and consider subscribing." I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I stayed in the guest room, my own guest room, staring at the ceiling, while the sound of cabinet doors opening and closing echoed faintly down the hallway. Margaret had woken up before sunrise and was already moving through the kitchen like she'd memorized the layout. When I finally walked in, she was at the stove wearing one of my aprons. Not similar mine. "You reorganized my cabinets," I said. It came out flatter than I expected. She smiled, stirring something I hadn't asked her to make. "I made it functional. You had things in all the wrong places." That word functional sat wrong with me, like I was the problem that needed fixing. "I didn't ask you to change anything I said, and Daniel didn't ask you to leave things so disorganized either," she replied, still not turning around. "This is a shared space now. You'll have to get used to compromise." "Shared." I didn't respond. I just grabbed my phone and stepped out onto the back patio, the ocean air hitting me like a reminder that this was still my house. Or at least, it was supposed to be. I called Daniel. It rang longer than usual before he picked up. "Hey," he said too, casually. "Your mother is in my house," I said. "Why?" A pause. "Not long, but long enough." "She told you, didn't she?" "Told me what?" "That we made some adjustments. It's temporary, Ev. She just needs a place for a while." "Adjustments," I repeated. "She has keys. She has documents. She's acting like she owns this place." "She doesn't own it," he said quickly. "Not like that. Not like that." "What does that mean?" Another pause. I could hear traffic in the background, the muffled hum of his car. "It just means we made a smart financial move," he said. "You've been so focused on work lately, I didn't want to stress you out with the details." I closed my eyes. That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know. "You used my signature," I said. No, I didn't use it," he said a little too fast. "You signed the documents. Remember, a few months ago, the refinance paperwork." My stomach tightened. I did remember signing something. Late at night after a long day. He'd walked me through it, said it was routine, said it would lower our payments. I hadn't questioned it. I trusted him. "You told me that was a refinance," I said slowly. "It is," he insisted. "Part of it. Look, you're overthinking this." "I'm not overthinking anything I said. Your mother is cooking in my kitchen and telling me I need to adjust. That's not normal. She's just trying to help," he said. "Help, by moving in without telling me." "She didn't move in. She's staying temporarily. She brought luggage, Daniel." He exhaled, frustrated now. "Why are you making this such a big deal?" "Because it is a big deal." But I didn't say that. Not yet. Instead, I said, "Send me the documents. All of them." "I already told you." "Send them?" I repeated. Another pause. "Then fine. I'll email them." He hung up before I could respond. I stayed outside for a minute longer, watching the waves roll in and out, steady and predictable. Nothing about my life felt like that anymore. When I went back inside, Margaret had plated breakfast. 2 plates. "I made extra," she said. "No need to be dramatic. Sit." "I'm not hungry." She shrugged and took a bite. "Suit yourself." "But you should start thinking long-term, Evelyn. This house is too valuable to be managed impulsively." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Impulsively, "Yes," she said, finally looking at me. "You bought this place before you were married. You didn't consult anyone." "That's not how family assets should work." "Family assets. That's not a family asset," I said. "That's my property." Her expression didn't change. Not anymore. The words landed quietly. No raised voice. No dramatic emphasis. Just a statement. I felt something shift inside me, not panic this time, not even anger. Something colder, sharper. "What did you do?" I asked. "I didn't do anything," she said calmly. "Daniel made a responsible decision. He's trying to protect what matters." "From me?" She tilted her head slightly. "From risk." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "What risk?" She set her fork down. "Your career is volatile. Markets change. Jobs disappear. You work in finance. You should understand that better than anyone." I stared at her. "So your solution was to take control of my house." "Our solution," she corrected. "That word again." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. An email from Daniel. Subject line: property documents. Updated structure. My chest tightened as I opened it. Multiple attachments. Legal files. PDFs. I tapped the first one. A trust agreement. I scrolled. My name. Daniel's name. And Margaret's. I opened the next file, a transfer document. There it was again, my name typed neatly, followed by a digital signature. Dated 3 months ago, the same night I'd signed the refinance. My fingers went cold as I zoomed in on the signature. At first glance, it looked like mine, the same looping style, the same spacing. But the longer I stared at it, the more something felt off. A slight tilt. A hesitation in one of the letters I never hesitated on. I swallowed, my pulse starting to pick up. Behind me, Margaret's voice cut through the silence. "You see, everything was done properly. I didn't turn around. I just kept staring at the signature. Because the more I looked at it, the more I realized. I wasn't sure I had actually signed that document at all. I didn't confront Margaret again that morning. There was no point. Not yet. Instead, I got dressed, grabbed my bag, and left the house without another word. She didn't try to stop me. She just watched me go, calm and certain, like she already knew how this would play out. That confidence bothered me more than anything she'd said. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Alicia Patel's office, I had already read through Daniel's email 3 times. I wasn't a lawyer, but I worked in finance. Contracts, signatures, liability. I understood enough to know that whatever had happened wasn't small. Alicia greeted me with a firm handshake and a look that said she had seen situations like this before. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. Not just the part about Margaret moving in, but the documents, the signature, the email chain, the timing. I walked her through it the way I would explain a financial anomaly step by step without exaggeration. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Let's take a look at the documents." I forwarded Daniel's email, and she pulled everything up on her screen. We started with the trust agreement. "This," she said, pointing at a section, "is a family trust structure. It allows assets like your house to be managed collectively under specific terms." "I didn't agree to that," I said. She nodded. That's what we're going to determine. She scrolled further down. According to this, the property was partially transferred into the trust 3 months ago. Ownership isn't gone, but it's no longer exclusively yours. My chest tightened. So she was right. Not entirely, Alicia said. Partial ownership doesn't mean she can just move in uninvited. Occupancy rights depend on how the trust is structured. That was something. A small something, but enough to keep me steady. We opened the transfer document next. Alicia zoomed in on the signature. You recognize this? I do, I said. But I don't remember signing this document. She studied it for a moment. Digital signatures can be legally binding, but they can also be misused, especially if someone had access to your credentials or guided you through a process without full disclosure. That's exactly what happened, I said. Daniel told me it was refinance paperwork. I signed it without reading everything. She gave a small understanding nod. That could fall under misrepresentation. The word landed differently than anything Margaret had said. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't personal. It was precise. And the trust I asked. Can it be reversed? Possibly, Alicia said. But we'd need to prove that you didn't give informed consent, that you were misled about what you were signing. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So I need proof, I said. Yes, she replied. And not just suspicion, something concrete. Emails, messages, recordings, anything that shows intent. Intent. I thought back to the email chain I'd skimmed the night before. Margaret's name had appeared more than once. Can we use email conversations, I asked. Absolutely, Alicia said. Especially if they show coordination or planning before you signed. I nodded slowly. There's more. I pulled out my phone and opened the email thread again. This time I read it carefully line by line. At first it looked like standard back and forth between Daniel and a financial advisor, but then I saw it. A forwarded message. From Margaret. Subject: safer structure for the beach property. I opened it. Her tone was polite, almost professional, but the content was clear. She was suggesting that the property be moved into a trust to ensure long-term stability and avoid unilateral decisions. Unilateral decisions. That was how she saw me. A risk factor. Look at this, I said, turning the phone toward Alicia. She read it carefully, then nodded. This is helpful. It shows she initiated the idea. But that's not illegal, I said. No, Alicia agreed. But it establishes a pattern. Keep going. I scrolled further. Another message. This one from Daniel to the advisor. We'll need to walk Evelyn through this carefully. She trusts me, so it shouldn't be an issue. My stomach dropped. Alicia's expression didn't change, but her pen stopped moving. That line she said quietly is important. Because he knew I wouldn't question it, I said. Because it suggests he understood you weren't fully informed, she corrected. I swallowed. We kept going. There were more emails, discussions about timing, about documentation, about making the process smooth. Margaret's name kept appearing, not always directly, but enough to show she was involved. It wasn't one message. It was a pattern. By the time we finished, the room felt quieter than before. Heavier. Alicia closed the laptop gently. You have the beginnings of a case, she said. But we're not there yet. What else do I need? Something direct, she replied. A statement. An admission. Something that clearly shows you were misled. I nodded, even though my chest felt tight again, because I already knew where that kind of evidence would have to come from. Back at the house, with Margaret and Daniel. I drove home slower than usual. Not because I was uncertain, but because I was thinking. Every word Margaret had said that morning, every shift in her tone, every assumption she made about me. She wasn't hiding what she believed. She thought she was right, and people who think they're right talk. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was still there. Of course it was. I sat in mine for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. This wasn't about reacting anymore. It was about listening. Carefully. Because the next time Margaret spoke, I wasn't going to argue. I was going to let her tell me exactly what she had done. I didn't walk back into the house like I had that morning. This time I paused at the door, adjusted my expression, and reminded myself of one thing: don't react. Not yet. When I stepped inside, Margaret was in the living room again, reading my copy of a book I hadn't finished. She had already made herself comfortable in every way that mattered. "You're back early," she said, glancing up briefly. "I wrapped things up faster than expected," I replied evenly, setting my bag down. She watched me for a second longer than necessary, like she was trying to read something beneath the surface. Then she went back to her book. That was fine. Let her think she was in control. I looked over the documents Daniel sent, I said casually. "Mm-hmm," she murmured. "And they're more complicated than I expected." She smiled faintly, still not looking up. "That's because you've been handling things at a very basic level. Real asset protection requires structure." There it was again, that quiet, cutting tone. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. I walked into the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water, giving her space to keep talking if she wanted to. "And Daniel understands that," she added. I took a slow sip, then leaned against the counter. He said it was a refinance. That got her attention. She closed the book, placing it neatly on the table. "Well," she said, choosing her words. "That's the simplest way to explain it." "It's also inaccurate," I replied. She shrugged lightly. "Details overwhelm people. Daniel was trying to make it easier for you." "Easier?" I nodded like I was considering it. "So the trust. That was your idea." She didn't hesitate. "Of course. I've seen too many assets disappear because people don't plan properly." "And you thought I wasn't planning properly." "I thought you were acting independently," she corrected, "which in a marriage can be dangerous." I let a small silence settle between us. Not tense, just enough to invite her to fill it. "And the signature?" I asked. "You weren't concerned about how that would work?" She waved a hand dismissively. "You signed the documents, Evelyn. No one forced you." I didn't know what I was signing. Her eyes met mine, now steady and unbothered. "That's not the same thing." The calmness in her voice was almost unsettling. "So Daniel just guided me through it?" I asked. "He explained what mattered," she said. "You trust your husband, don't you?" I held her gaze for a moment, then looked away, first deliberately. "That depends," I said. She studied me, something sharper flickering behind her expression. "You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be," she said. "Everything was done legally. You're still benefiting from the property. Nothing was taken from you." Not entirely true, but I didn't challenge her. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my phone and walked toward the hallway. "I need to check something," I said. In my office, I closed the door quietly and sat down at my desk. My laptop was exactly where I'd left it, but something about it felt off. Not moved, not tampered with, just accessed. I opened it anyway. My email inbox loaded, and I pulled up the same thread I'd reviewed earlier with Alicia. This time I paid attention to the timestamps. 3 months ago. Late evening. I remembered that night now. I'd been exhausted, barely focused signing documents Daniel had pulled up on his laptop. But this email thread? It showed activity earlier that day. Messages between Daniel and Margaret. Planning. Adjusting language. Confirming she'll sign tonight. My jaw tightened. I scrolled further. Another detail stood out this time. An attachment. Not the final document I'd signed, but a draft. I opened it. The structure was different. Ownership percentages control clauses. They had been revised multiple times before the final version, which meant the version I signed wasn't the only version that existed, and more importantly, it meant they had been shaping it before I ever saw it. A quiet knock came at the door. Evelyn Margaret's voice. I minimized the screen instinctively. "Yes, dinner tonight," she said through the door. "Daniel will be home. We should all sit down and talk." There was something deliberate in the way she said it. Not a suggestion. A setup. "I'll think about it," I replied. A pause. "Then, you should come prepared to be reasonable." Her footsteps faded down the hallway. I stared at my laptop again, my reflection faintly visible in the dark edge of the screen. Prepared. That was exactly what I needed to be. Because dinner wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a performance. And if I played it right, they might just tell me everything I still didn't know. I didn't go straight back into the living room after Margaret walked away. I stayed in my office a few extra minutes staring at the draft document on my screen. They hadn't just included me in the process. They had built the process around me, around what I wouldn't question, what I would assume, what I would trust. That realization didn't make me emotional. It made me precise. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and left the house again without announcing it. Margaret didn't stop me this time either. She was saving her energy for dinner. I could feel it. Rachel Nguyen answered on the second ring. "You sound like you're about to dismantle someone's life," she said, half joking. "Not dismantle," I replied, pulling into a quiet parking lot near the beach. "Correct." I walked her through everything Margaret, moving in the trust, the emails, the draft versions, the signature. Rachel didn't interrupt. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "They didn't forge your signature," she said. "I know. They didn't need to." That landed heavier than anything else. "They controlled the information," she continued. "That's how this works. If you can prove they intentionally misrepresented what you were signing, you're in a strong position. But you need something direct, something they can't explain away." "I have emails," I said. "Emails show planning," she replied. "You need intent. A statement that confirms they knew you didn't understand what you were agreeing to." I leaned against my car, watching the waves in the distance. "They're having dinner tonight. Both of them." Rachel was quiet for a second, then good. "Good. Yeah," she said. "People like that, when they think they've already won, they relax. They explain things. They justify themselves. That's when they say too much." I thought about Margaret's tone earlier. The certainty. The way she corrected my words instead of denying them. "She already thinks she's right," I said. "Exactly," Rachel replied. "So don't argue. Don't accuse. Ask questions. Let her fill the silence." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "And Evelyn," she added. "Yeah, record everything." I glanced down at my phone. I was planning to. Good. Because once you have that, everything changes. Everything changes. I hung up and sat in the car for a moment longer, letting the plan settle into place. No confrontation, no emotion, just observation. When I got back to the house, Margaret was already setting the table. 3 plates, 3 glasses, like a normal family dinner. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway just as I stepped inside. Right on time. He walked in a few seconds later, loosening his tie, his expression cautious when he saw me. "Hey," he said. "Hi," I replied, matching his tone. Margaret smiled, pleased. "Perfect timing." Dinner's ready." We sat down together, the three of us, like nothing had changed. For a few minutes it almost worked. Small talk, work updates, the weather. Then Margaret set her fork down. "Let's talk about the house," she said. There it was. I kept my expression neutral. What about it? She folded her hands neatly in front of her. "We need to establish some expectations moving forward." I asked. "Yes," she said. "This arrangement requires cooperation." I glanced at Daniel. He avoided my eye. "What kind of expectations?" I asked. Margaret didn't hesitate. "You'll need to be more flexible. There may be times when I need to stay here for extended periods. It's important for Daniel's stability." "For Daniel's stability," I repeated. She nodded. "He's under a lot of pressure right now. Financially." I let that sit for a moment. "What kind of pressure?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "It's nothing you need to worry about." "I think it is," I said calmly. Margaret stepped in before he could answer. "There were some investments that didn't go as planned. I advised him, of course, but markets can be unpredictable." Advised him. "And those investments are why you needed access to my property?" I asked. "It's not about access," she said. "It's about protection. Structuring assets so they're not exposed." "Exposed to what?" "To risk," she replied. "To poor decisions. To emotional reactions." Her eyes flicked to me briefly on that last part. I leaned back slightly, keeping my voice even. "So the solution was to move my house into a trust. Without explaining it to me." "We explained what mattered," she said again, almost rehearsed. Daniel finally spoke. "Evelyn, I didn't think you'd react like this. I thought—" "You thought I wouldn't notice," I interrupted. He stopped. Margaret's tone sharpened just a fraction. "This isn't productive." "No," I agreed. "It's not. So let's be clear." I reached for my glass, giving myself a second. "Did you know I didn't understand what I was signing?" I asked. Silence. Daniel looked down. Margaret looked at him, then back at me. "We knew you trusted Daniel," she said. "That wasn't what I asked." "And you used that," I said. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "Trust is part of marriage. You can't expect to control everything yourself." There it was. Not a denial. A justification. I felt something settle into place inside me. "Did you tell him to present it as a refinance?" I asked. Daniel's head snapped up. "Evelyn!" Margaret held up a hand, stopping him. "I told him to keep it simple," she said. "You were tired." It wasn't the right moment for a long explanation. I nodded slowly. "Right," I said, because that was exactly what Rachel had told me to listen for. Not lies. Certainty. The belief that what they did was reasonable. I set my glass down carefully. Across the table, Daniel was watching me now, really watching me for the first time since I got home. And I could see it in his expression. He knew something had shifted. What he didn't know yet was how much I had just captured. Dinner ended quietly. Too quietly for what had just been said. Margaret cleared the plates like nothing had happened. Daniel hovered near the sink, offering to help, trying to reset the atmosphere back to something normal. I didn't stop them. I just stood there for a moment, watching, listening, letting the silence stretch long enough to feel uncomfortable. Then I said, "There were more documents in the email." Margaret didn't turn around. "Yes. Some I haven't signed yet." That made her pause. Just for a second. Daniel looked over his shoulder. "You don't need to rush anything," he said quickly. Margaret set a plate down in the sink with more force than necessary. Actually, she does. There it was. I stepped closer to the table, keeping my tone neutral. "Why?" She turned to face me, drying her hands with a dish towel. "Because partial measures create exposure. The structure isn't complete yet." "Complete how?" "Full alignment of ownership and control," she said, like she'd said it 100 times before. I tilted my head slightly. Meaning the property needs to be fully under the trust, she said, not partially. Otherwise, decisions can still be made unilaterally. "By me," I said. She didn't deny it. Daniel stepped in softer this time. "It's just to stabilize things, Ev. Once everything is settled, it'll actually make life easier." "For who?" I asked. He hesitated. Margaret answered for him. "For the family." I let that sit for a moment, then nodded slowly like I was considering it. And if I don't sign, I asked. Margaret's expression didn't change, but her tone did just slightly firmer. Then you're choosing conflict over cooperation. That's not what I asked. She met my eyes directly now. Then things become complicated. There it was again. Not a threat. Not exactly, but close enough. I crossed my arms loosely, keeping my posture relaxed. Complicated how? Daniel shifted again. Let's not do this tonight. No, Margaret said calmly. It's fine. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to feel more personal. When assets are shared, Evelyn, decisions affect more than one person. If you refuse to cooperate, there are mechanisms to protect those interests. Legal mechanisms, I said. Yes, I nodded once. So you'd take legal action against me? If necessary, she replied. The room felt smaller suddenly, not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. I looked at Daniel. You're okay with that? He didn't answer right away. I just want things to calm down, he said finally. We're blowing this out of proportion. Out of proportion. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I took a step back, creating just enough distance to breathe. Okay, I said. Both of them looked at me, surprised by how quickly I said it. Okay, Margaret repeated. I'll review the documents, I said, properly this time. Her shoulders relaxed barely, but I saw it. That's all I'm asking, she said. I'll need time, I added. Of course. Daniel exhaled, relieved. Thank you. I nodded once, then turned and walked toward the hallway. Evelyn Margaret called after me. I stopped, but didn't turn around. You'll see, she said. This is the right decision. I didn't respond. I just kept walking. Back in my office, I closed the door and locked it. Then I sat down, pulled out my phone, and replayed the recording. Every word was there. Her tone, her certainty, her admission that they had simplified things because I was tired, her acknowledgement that I hadn't been fully informed, her willingness to escalate legally if I didn't comply. It wasn't dramatic. It was better than that. It was clear. I saved the file, backed it up, and sent a copy to Rachel. Then I opened my laptop and started organizing everything, emails, drafts, timestamps, bank notifications I hadn't paid attention to before. That's when I saw it. A series of withdrawals from our joint account. Small at first, then larger. Consistent. All within the last 4 months. My pulse slowed, not sped up. Because patterns like that weren't random. I pulled up the transaction details. Wire transfers. Recipient names I didn't recognize. But one detail stood out. A memo line on one of the transfers. Bridge payment. MC. Margaret Collins. I stared at the screen, my mind clicking into place piece by piece. This wasn't just about control. It was about money. And not just mine. Daniel's too. Which meant everything Margaret had said about stability. I was covering something else. Something bigger. I picked up my phone again and dialed Rachel. She answered immediately. That was fast. I have more, I said. I explained the transactions, the memo line, the pattern. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then, that changes things. How? It suggests motive, she said. Not just control financial pressure. If she's using the trust to shield assets while moving money through your joint account, she's protecting herself, I finished. Exactly. I looked back at the screen, the numbers still sitting there waiting to be understood. What do we do? I asked. Rachel didn't hesitate this time. We make her say it out loud. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of that sentence settling in, because I already knew the next conversation wasn't going to be about documents. It was going to be about money. And Margaret Collins was about to explain exactly why she needed my house. I didn't confront Margaret the next morning. That was the hardest part, knowing something had shifted, knowing I had enough to start pushing back, and choosing not to. Instead, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen island, watched her move around like she always did, efficient, controlled, completely at ease, like nothing was at risk. Sleep better? She asked, not looking at me. A little, I said. That wasn't a lie. I had slept, just not in the way she meant. I had spent half the night organizing files, labeling timestamps, matching email chains to transaction dates. The kind of work I did every day just applied to my own life for the first time. And the more I looked at it, the clearer it became. The transfers weren't random. They lined up with specific dates in the email thread. Conversations about temporary liquidity, about bridging short-term gaps, about keeping things stable until the structure is finalized. Stable. I stirred my coffee slowly. Daniel's been under a lot of pressure lately. Margaret nodded. He has. What kind of pressure? She hesitated this time. Not long, but long enough. Business decisions, she said. Investments that didn't perform as expected. That's vague. It's sufficient, she replied. I let a small smile touch my lips. Not for me. She finally turned to face me fully. Why are you asking now? Because it affects me, I said simply. Her eyes held mine for a second longer than usual. Then she looked away. It's being handled, she said. By who? By me. There it was again. That certainty. That control. I set my spoon down. With money from our joint account. That got her attention. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked, "What makes you say that?" I shrugged lightly. Patterns. Silence. Daniel walked in just then, adjusting his watch. His expression tight when he saw both of us standing there. "What's going on?" he asked. "Your wife is asking questions," Margaret said calmly. Daniel looked at me. "About what?" "About money," I said. His shoulders stiffened. "It's not a big deal," he said quickly. "Just some temporary bridge payments," I interrupted. That stopped him. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. I held their gaze evenly. That's what the memo line says. Bridge payment. MC. That's you right. Margaret didn't respond. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Evelyn. I was going to explain when I asked. He didn't answer. I nodded once, then leaned back against the counter. How much I asked. Evelyn. How much Daniel? He exhaled slowly like he was buying time. About 40,000, he said finally. The number didn't shock me. I had already added it up. What was it for? He glanced at Margaret. She didn't help him. Some investments went sideways, he said. Mom had some obligations, short-term ones. I helped cover them. With our money. With money we share, he corrected. I didn't react to that. And the house I asked. That's part of covering it too. No, he said quickly. That's separate. It doesn't look separate, I said. Margaret stepped in then, her tone sharper than before. You're connecting things that aren't directly related. Am I asked. Yes, she said. The trust structure is about long-term protection. The financial situation is temporary. Temporary problems don't usually lead to permanent changes in ownership, I said. That landed. Daniel looked between us, clearly uncomfortable now. Can we not do this right now? He asked. I have to get to work. Margaret nodded. We'll continue this later. No, I said. Both of them looked at me. We'll finish this now, I continued, because I need to understand exactly what I'm being asked to sign. Silence filled the room again. Margaret crossed her arms. You're being asked to complete a structure that protects this family's assets. At the cost of my control, I said. At the benefit of stability, she replied. For you, I said. Her eyes flashed just for a second. That's an unfair characterization. Is it? Daniel stepped forward, his voice lower now. Evelyn, please. You're making this adversarial. I looked at him, really looked at him this time. You already made it adversarial, I said. You just didn't tell me. That hit harder than anything else I'd said so far. He didn't respond. Margaret, on the other hand, straightened slightly, her posture shifting into something more formal. Then let's be clear, she said. If you refuse to cooperate, the current structure remains in place, which means decisions about the property will require agreement from all parties. All parties, I repeated. Yes. So I lose autonomy either way. You gain protection, she said. I let out a small breath. No, I said quietly. You gain protection. That was the first time her expression changed fully. Not anger, something closer to recognition. Like she realized I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was seeing it. All of it. Daniel checked his watch again, clearly looking for an exit. I have to go, he said. Go, I replied. He hesitated, then grabbed his keys and left without another word. The front door closed behind him with a soft click. Margaret and I stood there in silence. Two people who understood exactly what the other was doing. She spoke first. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, she said. That was your first mistake, I replied. A faint smile touched her lips. And what do you think your next move is? I met her gaze steadily. I'm not thinking about moves, I said. I'm thinking about clarity. Clarity leads to decisions, she said. Exactly. Another pause. Then she said, just make sure you understand the consequences before you make one. I nodded slowly. I do, I said, and for the first time since she walked into my house, I meant it completely. Because now I didn't just have suspicion. I had motive. I had pattern. And I had her on record defending all of it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. By the time Daniel left for work, the house felt different. Quieter but sharper. Like everything that had been implied before was now sitting out in the open waiting to be acknowledged. Margaret poured herself another cup of coffee, calm as ever. You're approaching this emotionally, she said, not looking at me. I'm approaching it accurately, I replied. That got her attention. She turned slowly, studying me in a way she hadn't before. Not dismissive. Not corrective. Evaluating. Then say what you think is happening, she said. I didn't hesitate. I think you needed money, I said. I think Daniel tried to help you. And I think moving my property into a trust gave you leverage, control, protection, maybe even access if things got worse. She didn't interrupt. That's a theory, she said when I finished. It's a pattern I corrected. A small smile formed at the corner of her mouth. Patterns can be misleading. Not when they repeat, I said. Silence settled between us again, heavier this time. I reached into my pocket and placed my phone on the counter screen facing down. Not hidden, not obvious, just there. Let's simplify this, I said. Did you need money? She tilted her head slightly. Everyone needs money. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Then, yes. Direct. How much? That's not your concern. It became my concern when it came out of my account, I said. Her expression tightened just slightly. Temporary liquidity issues, she said. They happen. And the trust I asked. That just happened too. No, she said. That was planned. Before or after the financial issues. She hesitated. There it was. Before she said finally. I held her gaze. That's not what the timeline shows. Her eyes flicked toward my phone for half a second, then back to me. You're assuming too much, she said. I don't think I am, I replied. I think you needed to stabilize your situation. And Daniel made his own decisions, she cut in. Based on your advice. Based on what was best for the family. I let out a quiet breath. You keep saying that. Because it's true. For you, I said again. This time she didn't correct me. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice lowering. You're looking at this the wrong way, she said. Without structure, everything you've built is vulnerable. Markets shift. People make mistakes. I've seen it happen. So you decided to step in, I said. I decided to prevent loss, she replied. At my expense. At everyone's benefit. I shook my head slowly. That's not how it works. It is when you understand risk, she said. I understand risk, I replied. What I don't accept is being misled. She sighed like I was being difficult. You weren't misled, she said. You were simplified. The word hung in the air. Simplified. Like I was a variable they had adjusted for. So Daniel knew I didn't fully understand, I asked. He knew you trusted him, she said, and you used that, I said. She didn't deny it this time. Instead, she said, trust is a tool. It's part of how families function. That was it. Not a slip. Not an accident. A belief. I picked up my phone, turning it over in my hand, not to check it, just to feel it there. And if I don't sign anything else, I asked. Her expression returned to that calm, controlled state. Then the current structure remains, she said, which means decisions will require agreement. You won't be able to act independently, so I'm already restricted. You're protected. I gave a small, almost amused shake of my head. No, I said quietly. You are. She watched me carefully now. You're framing this as conflict, she said. Because it is, I replied. It doesn't have to be. Then why wasn't I included from the beginning? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer but no less certain. Because you wouldn't have agreed. There it was. Not just intent. Strategy. I felt something settle completely into place inside me. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just clarity. Thank you, I said. Her brows lifted slightly. For what? For being honest. She studied me, something unreadable passing through her expression. You're welcome, she said slowly. I nodded once, then stepped back. I think we're done here, I said. For now, she replied. I turned and walked toward my office, my pulse steady, my thoughts precise. Behind me, I could feel her watching. Not worried. Not yet. Because she still thought this was a conversation. What she didn't realize was that it had already become something else. Something documented. Something structured. Something I could use. And for the first time since she walked into my house, I wasn't trying to understand what she had done. I was preparing to show exactly how she had done it. The mediation room didn't look like a place where lives changed. It was neutral glass walls, a long table, filtered light coming in from the windows. No raised voices, no dramatic entrances. Just paperwork, quiet tones, and decisions that carried weight long after the room was empty. Margaret sat across from me, composed as always. Daniel was beside her, but not quite with her. I noticed that immediately. The distance wasn't physical, it was in the way he avoided eye contact, in the way his hands stayed folded instead of resting near hers. Rachel sat next to me, calm, prepared. Alicia was there too, representing the structural side of the case. Everything was in place. The mediator, a middle-aged man with a steady voice, opened the session. We're here to resolve a dispute regarding property ownership and alleged misrepresentation. Let's proceed constructively. Constructively. I almost appreciated the word. Margaret spoke first. As I've said before, she began, everything was done legally. Evelyn signed the documents. The trust structure is valid, and the property is protected as intended. Her tone was controlled, measured. This was her environment now, formal, structured, rule-based. Rachel nodded slightly, then leaned forward. We're not disputing that documents were signed, she said. We're addressing how those signatures were obtained. Margaret's expression didn't change. Through a standard process. Rachel glanced at me once, then back at the mediator. With your permission, she said we'd like to present supporting material. The mediator nodded. Go ahead. Rachel placed a folder on the table and slid copies across. Email threads, transaction summaries, timeline charts. Everything I had spent the past 2 days organizing. Margaret looked down at the documents briefly, then back up. I've seen these. Then you're aware of the coordination that took place before the signing, Rachel said. Coordination is not misconduct, Margaret replied. No, Rachel agreed. But misrepresentation is. A pause. Then Rachel pressed a button on her tablet. The room filled with Margaret's voice. You were tired. It wasn't the right moment for a long explanation. No one spoke. The recording continued. Calm, clear, undeniable. He knew you trusted him. I didn't look at Margaret. I didn't need to. If you refuse to cooperate, there are mechanisms. Rachel paused the audio. That recording was taken in your residence, she said evenly. You acknowledge that voice. Margaret didn't answer immediately. Then, yes. No denial. The mediator leaned forward slightly. That suggests awareness that the signing party did not fully understand the documents. Margaret's jaw tightened just enough to notice. It suggests we chose an appropriate time to present information. Rachel didn't argue. She just let that sit. Then Alicia spoke. Combined with the email evidence, she said this establishes a pattern of intentional simplification, knowing the signer relied on incomplete information. Daniel shifted beside his mother. For the first time, he looked directly at me. Not defensive, not dismissive. Uneasy, Rachel continued. Additionally, we have financial records indicating that funds from the joint account were used to address obligations tied to Ms. Collins. Margaret's eyes flicked toward her sharper now. That's irrelevant, she said. It establishes motive, Rachel replied. The room went quiet again. The mediator looked between both sides. Given what's been presented, he said slowly, there is a credible argument for misrepresentation, which means the current structure may not hold under scrutiny. That was the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Margaret leaned back slightly, her posture changing for the first time since we'd sat down. This is being exaggerated, she said. We acted in good faith. Rachel didn't respond. She didn't need to. The evidence had already done that. Daniel spoke, then his voice lower than before. Mom. Margaret turned to him. Not now. But he didn't stop. This wasn't how it was supposed to go, he said. The room stilled again. Rachel didn't move. Alicia didn't speak. Even the mediator stayed silent. Because this part wasn't legal anymore. It was personal. Daniel looked at me. I thought it would help. I thought if everything was structured, we wouldn't lose anything. You didn't tell me what I was signing, I said. He swallowed. I know. Margaret's voice cut in sharper now. This is not the place. Yes, it is, he said, surprising all of us. He turned to her. You said it was temporary. You said once things stabilized, we'd adjust it back. Margaret's expression hardened. And we would have. But you didn't tell her that he said. Silence. He looked back at me. I should have told you. It wasn't an apology yet, but it was closer than anything I'd heard before. The mediator cleared his throat gently. Given the circumstances, he said I would recommend revisiting the structure entirely, possibly unwinding the transfer, returning ownership to its original state, and addressing any financial disputes separately. Margaret didn't respond right away. She looked at the documents again. The recording, the timeline. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the narrative. We'll need time to consider, she said finally. Rachel nodded. Of course, but I didn't speak, because the decision wasn't theoretical anymore. It was already moving. And for the first time since this started, the outcome wasn't something I had to imagine. It was something I could see. Margaret stood first. Daniel followed. Neither of them looked at me as they left the room, but I didn't need them to, because the power had already shifted. Not through anger, not through confrontation, through clarity. And that was something they hadn't prepared for. The house felt different the day I changed the locks. Not quieter, not emptier, just mine again. The locksmith worked quickly, moving from door to door, while I stood nearby, arms folded, watching each mechanism click into place. Front door, back door, side entrance, even the small storage access by the garage. Every entry point that had once been taken for granted was now deliberate, controlled, chosen. When he finished, he handed me a new set of keys. Only copies, he asked. Only copies, I said. I didn't hesitate. A week had passed since the mediation, long enough for everything to settle into something official. The trust structure had been unwound. Completely. Every document that had shifted ownership was reversed under legal review. Alicia had handled the process carefully, making sure nothing remained ambiguous. The house was back under my name fully exclusively without shared control. The financial issue was separated just like Rachel suggested. Daniel had taken responsibility for the debt connected to his mother. There were agreements in place now, clear, documented, enforceable. Margaret hadn't contacted me since the mediation ended. Not a call, not a message. And I didn't expect one. People like her didn't apologize. They recalibrated. I walked through the house slowly after the locksmith left, noticing the details again, the way the light hit the floors in the afternoon, the sound of the ocean through the open windows, the stillness that used to feel comforting before it was disrupted. It felt like returning to something I had built, not something I had inherited or been allowed to use. My phone buzzed on the counter. Daniel. I let it ring once before answering. Hey, I said. There was a pause on the other end. I saw the charge for the locksmith, he said. I changed the locks, I replied. I figured. Silence stretched between us. I'm not coming by without asking, he said after a moment. That's a good start, I said. Another pause. I know that's not enough, he added. No, I said. It's not. I didn't say it harshly, just plainly. I've been going over everything, he continued. The emails, the recordings, what you said in mediation, what she said. I leaned against the counter, letting him talk. I didn't see it clearly at the time he said, I thought I was fixing something. I thought I was protecting us. You weren't, I said. I know that now. That was the closest thing to accountability he had offered so far. I should have told you the truth, he said. All of it. Even if you didn't like it. Yes, I said. I want to fix this, he added. I looked out toward the ocean, the horizon steady and distant. You can't fix it, I said. He went quiet. You can take responsibility, I continued. You can deal with the consequences, but you can't undo what you chose to do. I'm trying, he said. I see that, I replied. And I did, in a way, but seeing effort wasn't the same as restoring trust. So what happens now? He asked. That was the question. Not about the house, not about the documents, about us. I took a breath, letting the answer come without forcing it. I'm not making any decisions about that right now, I said. I need space. Real space. Not temporary. Okay, he said quietly. And that means boundaries, I added. Clear ones. You don't come here unless I invite you. You don't make decisions that involve me without telling me everything. No simplifying, no assumptions. I understand, he said. I hope you do, I replied, because that part wasn't negotiable. We stayed on the line for another moment, neither of us rushing to end the call, but neither of us pretending things were normal either. I'm sorry, he said finally. I closed my eyes briefly. I hear you, I said. Not forgiveness, not rejection, just acknowledgement. We ended the call without saying anything else. I set my phone down and walked toward the front door, testing the new lock one more time. It clicked firmly. Secure. Certain. For the first time in weeks, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief exactly, something deeper. Ownership. Not just of the house, of my decisions, my boundaries, my life. Margaret had wanted control. Daniel had wanted stability. But what I needed was clarity, and now I had it. I turned off the lights and stepped outside, the evening air cool against my skin. The ocean stretched out in front of me, unchanged by everything that had happened behind me. Some things stayed constant. Everything else, you learn to rebuild. What I learned from all of this isn't something dramatic or easy to summarize. It's quieter than that. Sometimes the people closest to you don't break your trust loudly. They reshape it slowly through small decisions, withheld details, and the assumption that you won't question them. And by the time you realize what's happening, the structure has already shifted. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you're choosing conflict. It means you're choosing clarity. And clarity often feels uncomfortable, especially to people who benefited from your silence. I don't regret trusting my husband, but I do understand now that trust without transparency isn't stability, it's vulnerability. And forgiveness, if it ever comes, doesn't mean restoring access. It doesn't mean going back to how things were. It means deciding what you're willing to carry forward and what you're not. If you've ever been in a situation where your own family made decisions for you instead of with you, I'd really like to hear your perspective. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if stories like this resonate with you, stories about boundaries, accountability, and rebuilding, feel free to subscribe. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.